three beautiful women talk about their work and their methods behind it and what goes into printmaking, because I actually don't know much about printmaking. So this is part of the reason this show excited me so much, was because Orna is taking, printmaking to a different level, and I'm real excited to hear about what you guys are going to say, each of y'all. Did y'all talk about who wants to go first?
I'll start.
So, yeah, let's
Yeah.
start. I'm going to take some pictures.
First of all, thank you, Bill, for hosting this exhibition, and Jen and Bill for hanging the exhibition so beautifully. It's not easy because this is a retrospective exhibition of work from the past 15 years. And as you can see, in 15 years, the work went through a major evolution from 2D to 3D. And you might see many techniques, many material, and a lot of color. So it's not easy to hang it, so each piece looks good where it hangs. So thanks for that, both of you. So as I mentioned, this is a retrospective exhibition. I was invited to show my work at the Midland Museum of the Southwest, and from there it traveled to Galveston Art Center. Then it came here to be at the gallery in conjunction with Print Austin that Annalise will talk about. And from here it's traveling to the Museum of Geometric Art in Dallas, and from there to the museum in Beaumont. So it's a traveling exhibition. And as I mentioned, in 15 years I moved from printing on paper to printing on plexiglass and creating sculptures and installations. And that's pretty fast to go from 2D to 3D in 15 years. It wasn't easy because the process is very experimental. As most processes in printmaking, it's not a direct painting on canvas or paper where you have control on colors and pressure and everything. In printmaking, you have a little mystery under the press where the pressure causes the print to become slightly different than maybe you have expected. The process that I use mostly is a monoprint, which means one of a kind. So each print is done under pressure, as I said, and the artwork is done on plexiglass. Then the paper gets put on top of the plexiglass. The pressure transfers the ink from the plexi to the paper. I'm not going to talk about the process itself much because there is so much to talk about, but if you are not familiar with monoprints, I highly suggest that you go to YouTube and put my name, and there is a 3-minute video about how to make a monoprint, and after 3 minutes you'll be experts. I promise you, and you might want to start printmaking yourself. So what did I do? So when I started printmaking on paper, something was missing from me because I was working as a sculptor, creating plates and templates out of material and not working with a brush. Therefore, my thought process was dimensional. And I said, how do I make this process of monoprint that is so 2D, how do I make it more dimensional? So I started by printing on paper, crumpling the paper, and collaging. And when that wasn't enough, I started to print on fabrics. And the first ones are, you can see behind you, the green piece. I printed on fabric and paper, and obviously the fabric has to have holes so you can see through. Or like the red piece over here, where I printed on 2-3 layers of fabrics and paper, and simply layered them one on top of the other. But since the fabric is transparent, you can see through to the first layer, but you get effects of depth that you don't get like you get on these prints over here. And when that wasn't enough, I decided to work and print on plexiglass, and the first works were something like this, where I printed on 2 plexis, put space between them, and then created also movement in addition to the depth. And when that wasn't enough, I said, well, what if I add more layers? It turned out to be that I can't hang it on the wall anymore. That's when it became a sculpture, like you see behind you here, with multiple layers. It went to the pedestal, and when I wanted it bigger, it came to the floor, because the pedestal will not hold it any longer. And from here, I made bigger installations that are site-specific, like the one that you see in the window outside, and other things that are hanging from the ceiling, and the sky's the limit where I go, from where I go next. So with this brief survey of the work, I want to let the other ladies talk about what they see that's happening currently in Texas and in the world maybe with printmaking, because before printmaking was a niche art where, you know, there were guilds, there were people, just a group of people doing shows only of printmaking, and now you see prints everywhere in all the galleries, and they are no less than paintings and sculptures. So we have Annalise from here, and she works at Flatbed, and she's working at the gallery, and we have Veronica, who is a print master, a master printer, and I make everything by myself. I do not have anybody that does the work for me. I print myself, but she is a master printer, and she will tell you what's the difference between me working alone and her job as a master printer.
Would you like to start with that?
I actually wanted to comment on your journey from printmaking into sculpture, and how I have found in printing for other artists that the reverse also works very well a lot of times. I think sculpture and printmaking have a lot in common. And I think both sculptors and printmakers are very interested in materiality, because we work on objects or through processes in order to get to the final object. You mentioned how you're not doing a direct process with painting or drawing where, you know, it's, here's, I am on my surface and there's the mark that I'm making. And that's true of both printmaking and sculpture. And a lot of the artists that I've worked with over the course of my time as a printer, when they come in as sculptors who have not made prints before, they tend to have a much more open and experimental approach to printmaking than someone who has a background in drawing or painting, where they want to take the look that they do in their studio and just kind of replicate it through prints. Sculptors tend to say, well, what can I do through this medium that's new? And I feel like your journey from printmaking into sculpture just was the inverse of that.
Exactly.
Your printmaking was starting to expand, and so you brought it out into this other medium, which for me also speaks to the contemporization of printmaking. Because there are so many processes in art in general. There's a real movement towards video and film and, you know, installation, things that are outside of that matrix and outside of, you know, the square on the wall. And that brings printmaking into a larger conversation. It's just another tool of mark making. And that's part of the contemporization of it and its, you know, distribution throughout the larger art market, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's correct too. And you know, like Orna said, printmaking traditionally has had kind of a small audience, and a lot of people almost, I would say, misunderstand prints. There's this attitude towards editioning a print where people think they're copies. There are people, you know, that think, oh, okay, so there's an original and then all these other prints are reproductions. And that's not the case. When we edition prints, we're from Flatbed, which is the fine arts publishing press in town, and we make intaglios and lithographs and relief cuts primarily. And we go through the process of printing a plate by hand every time we print it. So we re-ink the plate, we re-tear or re-soak or recut the paper that we're using. It's all assembled together before it's run through the press. And so every time we pull a print, we go through this process from start to finish of being involved and working with the master printer, with the artist, to create each print. So we refer to them as multiple originals. And now Orna's work, since they're monotypes, there is only one, so they're not editioned. But in an edition, they're not so much reproductions as they are multiple originals. And it's been kind of a movement to bring printmaking into galleries, to have this kind of same sense of worth as a painting or a sculpture, because there's that kind of misinterpretation, because they're more and they're reproductions. A lot of people think they're kind of worthless. And so a lot of our communities, printmaking communities, have been working to educate the public on what printmaking is, and through that we've brought printmaking more into the forefront, and a lot of galleries are now more accepting to printmaking, and so it's just an exciting time to be a printmaker.
Yeah. I want to say that you reminded me that almost in every exhibition when I talk to people about prints, they always ask me, so where is the original?
Right.
They don't understand that this is the original. That's one thing. And the other thing is that I do monoprints, as you know by now, and they are one of a kind. And usually artists do prints because they want to have multiples. They want to have an edition of, I don't know, 20, 50, whatever, of the same. So in that case, a monoprint is like an oxymoron term. Why print if it's only one? Why can't you paint it? And the answer to that is that the process is very appealing to me, that's A, and there are a lot of little surprises in the process. I mean, you can plan a lot of things, but because it goes under the pressure, there is a third element there that dictates slightly, you know, effects that you would not either anticipate or you cannot achieve in any other way. So that's why I do the monoprints. With these remarks, I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in Texas with printmaking. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, a group of women in Houston decided that it's time to have an annual event in Houston where most of the galleries or the museums would participate and show prints to teach people and educate them about processes, about different artists, about trends, and all of that. So successfully, I think this is going to be the 4th year this summer in June. And they have almost, I think, like 60% of the galleries and the Museum of Fine Arts and the Museum of Printing History, they all participate and show exhibitions. And Austin saw how well we are doing in Houston, and they decided to start their own Print Austin event, which took place last month, and this exhibition was part of it. So I'll let Annalise tell you a little bit about Print Austin.
Yeah, well, printmaking by its very nature is very communal because there's a lot of machinery that needs to be utilized. You need a lot of space. A lot of times you're working with heavy equipment. And then Veronica can expand on that too, what it's like to, you know, collaborate with people. And so we kind of rely on each other in a way to have communal spaces to work. And so in Texas, there are lots of different print shops. There's Flatbed Press here in Austin. There's Slugfest, which is a litho workshop. And then in Houston, there's Burning Bones Press. There was Peregrine Press in Dallas that closed down about 10 years ago. But there are other presses all over the state of Texas. Printmaking is huge in Texas as an art form.
It's part of the reason I moved here.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, like I said, we've been trying to move printmaking into the forefront and educate the general public on what printmaking is and its viability as a fine art form. And Print Houston has been doing that very successfully. And a lot of our artists that work in Houston also work in Austin and vice versa. We show in the same areas. We all kind of know each other. It's kind of a tight-knit community. And so some of us wanted to start a similar organization in Austin so we could bring in more galleries that wouldn't be as familiar with Austin printmakers and bring them into this community and start this organization and start this dialogue about printmaking in Austin and what's happening. And this is our 2nd year, and this is the end of Print Austin, unfortunately. But it's already, just since last year, it's just really picked up a lot of momentum. And it's been really exciting, and we're just, you know, we're really happy and excited to see where it goes.
A crazy, I mean, there was so much going on.
So
you
much.
couldn't possibly see it all. And if you didn't see something,
It was everywhere.
It was always next year.
Yeah,
it was always next year.
Yeah.
As I mentioned to you before, I do monoprints, and I have my own studio and my own press, so I don't need to share a space with the other artists because I'm a full-time artist and I need the press all the time. So that means that I do all the work by myself. However, there are artists who, mostly I think coming from painting and sculptures, who want to make prints, who go to print shops and use master printers to do the work because they never took a class in printmaking, so they don't know how to make it work. So I want Veronica to tell us a little bit about the difference between what I'm doing in the studio from A to Z all by myself, including cleanup, and what she does and what does the artist do in the print shop, and what does she do, how they divide the work between the two of them.
Well, first off, it's not a set formula for every artist. We get artists from a wide variety of disciplines, including people who do make prints, but just want to do a project perhaps more ambitious than they could accomplish on their own or with their own equipment. And each artist kind of takes a different level of control over things or lets different things go. And part of my job as a master printer is to learn how to work with that individual artist and how much of my input they want or don't want. And that's something that you only learn as you're working with them. Usually the second project goes way better than the first, because the first we're just figuring out how to get along as humans, trying to make something hopefully beautiful or ugly depending on their aesthetic. And the second time we understand each other's language and how we talk about color or texture, and then you can kind of dive in and get a little bit deeper. And there is a real difference between working with a master printer in collaboration and making your own work in the studio. And it's not that either one is better or worse, it's just very different. And I also work as an individual artist, and I make my own work. I would love to have someone else print for me someday. Someday. And it's a super different experience than what I get from working with an artist. And I think an artist-printer relationship, you kind of feed off of each other. Because anytime that you're in collaboration with someone, they can pick you up at the parts where you're falling down and vice versa. You know, I am there mostly to provide technical expertise, but a surprising amount of artists really value and want aesthetic input as well. And sometimes that technical expertise leads into the aesthetic because they're going for a certain look. And I say, well, if this is what you want for your end result, then we really should stick with this particular process in order to get that look that you have in mind. But there's a lot of experimentation, and it happens in stages. I guess the best thing for me to do is maybe break down the relationship in general. An artist will come to us with an idea, and I usually, if an artist has not ever made prints before, like to do what I call a play date, where they come in and we just sort of mess around with some materials, and none of it's ever going to be on the wall of a gallery ever. We're just trying to figure out how you like to make things and how I can talk to you in a way that we understand each other. So we'll go through this play date and get some ideas for something more serious, and then schedule some time for collaboration. And the collaboration time is where we're developing matrices, and a matrix can be anything from a wood block to a lithostone to a copper plate to a piece of cloth, in your case many times. It's whatever the ink gets put onto before it touches against the paper is your matrix. And many prints are several matrices all printed onto the same sheet of paper. A lot of times if you see a print that has more than one color in it, that's because there's more than one matrix that all has to be lined up. So during collaboration, we develop these matrices. We print them in a bunch of different colors, a bunch of different papers, and get, hopefully, fingers crossed, doesn't always happen, to what's called a BAT. That is an acronym, which stands for Bon à Tirer. It's a French term, good to pull, which is the one that the artist wants all of the rest of them to look like. They say, this is the one, this is great, I'm going on vacation, see 30 prints from now.
Have fun.
Yes, and then they go off and do whatever they do with the rest of their lives, and at that point, myself and generally an assistant will go through that process of making 30 of them that look exactly like the one that they signed to the best of our ability. There's always a little bit of variation, but we try to keep it pretty tight.
Real quick question. Is the smaller the variation, the more desirable, or do people
Depends on the artist.
Okay, so sometimes it varies to where people might kind of like that differentiation between each.
Yeah,
consistency.
I kind of think of myself as a human machine in a lot of ways. Like my goal as a printer during editioning is to have everyone be as exact as possible.
Right.
But sometimes artists do things where there's inherently going to be variation. Where maybe they've done some hand stitching on a paper and the stitching isn't the same every time, so it's going to react to this different, and it just kind of depends on the project. My personal goal is to have them look as consistent as possible. I went through a training program in New Mexico where they trained master printers, and they were really like, gotta look the same. Yeah, I'm trying.
And that's an interesting point because different printmakers also approach their, to expand on your question, their editions differently. Some people like that, they want that expertise in making it as similar as possible. And other people like for it to be different. And there's a term called varied edition too, which is where there are variations from one print to the next. And they can be completely different, or it can be a gradual change from the beginning to end, or it can just be, little things that they're doing differently here and there. But people approach it differently.
I'd also like to throw out there that we do work with artists for monotypes as well. So you can come into Flatbed and work through a master printer in order to create a set of individual prints. And that's another thing which happens completely differently depending on the way the artist wants to work. Some of them do more of a direct painting onto a plexiglass and spend a lot of time with a single matrix making everything perfect, and then we run it through on paper and voila. Others like to build up lots of layers of colors and shapes and lines to make the final piece. There's a wide variety of things that can happen with monotyping in an individual studio or working with a printer.
Well, I'm like you, hoping that one day I'll have a master printer. Not because I don't like the process in my studio or my press, but because I'm printing on larger plates.
Yeah.
And I have a manual press, which means I have a huge wheel. It's like 4 feet in diameter that I have to roll. And it becomes harder and harder the larger the plates are. So hopefully one day I'll go to a place where they have a huge press and they will do the hard labor.
And that impulse is a lot of what brings printmakers into Flatbed, because we do have a huge press and we have interns who can help carry heavy things across the studio. And a lot of times they just want to do something bigger than they could do on their own, even though they know the process and can maybe pull it off, from a conceptual point of view.
Yes. With that, I think we'll open the floor for questions, if you have any questions to any of us, all of us.
I might just start off
Yes.
with a question. And I know it's a very basic question, but I found that a lot of people that came in were their question always came to them when they saw these. And, I have a lot of questions like, how is this done? And sometimes I'm a detective and I can try to figure it out. And, she's layering fabrics. But, coming to them and reading what you've done and explaining it and things like that, I want to hear it from you. Like, how are you achieving these like multi-layers, and what's the fabric that you're using, and behind the scenes kind of for these pieces.
I think that these pieces really puzzle people, because when they come and they don't know how prints are done, they think that's wow, if I have to draw this, it will take me 5 years to do every little line, and with such a steady hand, I mean, it's like impossible. How is it done? But as I said, if you look at the video, you will understand. But I will just briefly tell you that in monoprint, what you do is you take a plexiglass and you put the ink on top of the plexiglass. And on top of the ink, you can put a matrix. It can be a netting in this specific case, or a fabric, or a construction of cardboard of shapes that I've made, or rubber bands, or leaves, or feathers, or anything that's soft material that will not break the plexi under the pressure of the press. So these are done with netting material on top of the plexiglass, and then when you press it, you get the impression of the net on the plexiglass. Then you put the paper over, you run it again through the press, and you get the texture from the netting. Now this is a multiple layer process, so each layer is done again. I clean the plexiglass, there's nothing on it, I ink it again, create the pattern, and run it again. In case of the prints with the colors, then not only that I put the netting with the same color, I use different colors and build up the color through the layers. And this is, again, one thing that I love about the print process, is because if I go with numerous colors on top of each other, the end result is known but not 100%, because when you mix a color on a palette, you know exactly what you're getting. But if you build up the layers, red, let's say yellow over red, I know I'm going to get an orange, but I don't know exactly what kind of orange. Will it be yellow orange or red orange? I don't know. So those slight variation are the thing that fascinate me in the process. So that's the way they're done.
On the average, how long does each piece take
piece?
So there is no average for any of the pieces because I work with layers. I start, let's say, one day with one color, and I make, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 prints that same day. And then the next, I let it dry. I let them dry between the layers. So I let it dry, so the next day I come, they're still wet, then I'm starting 5 new ones.
Yeah.
So by the end of the week, I probably have 25 that are not done, but each one is a certain progression, right? So if you ask me how long it takes, I don't know. Some prints I may finish in a week, and some of them might sit in the drawer a year, or 6 months, or 4 months, until I come back to them. Because I mentioned the cleanup. The cleanup is a big, not fun activity, especially after the fun, right? You're having fun in the studio, and then when you're tired, you have to sit down or stand up and clean up for half an hour. So I try to work with one color each day, so I don't have 2 brayers, 2 plates, 2 tables, 2 everything. So that's why that also delays the process and the progress, because if I work with black and that piece needs yellow, well, it might need to wait a month until I'm working with yellow, you know? So that's my method. Not everybody works like this. Actually, a lot of people don't like to work like this, because then you have to keep track of what's in the drawer and where am I with this, and they get confused. But for me, it works very well. So I never push the piece to completion. I just flow with, you know, whatever piece I feel like working that same day. I want to know really about that process in the studio, because a master printer work for an artist. I mean, they have deadline, and they need to. They cannot play like me. So.
Well,
talk about that?
when they come in to collaborate, they have a certain amount of time scheduled. And we work with multiple artists, so you know they might be here Monday through Wednesday, somebody else is coming in on Thursday. So if we need more time, we can't always spill over into that, we'll just stay an extra day. That's not generally how it works. But you don't know when you come in how long it's going to take to get to that end point with something. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Anna, in talking to artists. I feel like it's one of the hardest things to get through to an artist, that they need to honor their work and take the time that it takes to get to the BAT, and not try to have it for that show in November. Because you're going to end up cutting corners. You know, if you give me only 2 weeks to edition it, it's not going to be a good edition. You know, so we really try to encourage the artists to work more in the way that you do. Like, let's focus while we're here, make the most efficient use of our time. Absolutely. We're not dawdling by any means, but you can't rush it either, or you're not going to get a good result.
So I guess, you know, that's sort of something they need to kind of do as an artistic environment, and you're like the meeting where you're like, okay, let's, you know, kind of talk more about statistics and, you know, the more hardcore process, whereas taking time for the BAT might be more, you know, is that where the kind of artist does his sort of thinking, or is it more, how much, I guess, would the artist feel like the creative processes happen with you as compared to, you know, thinking of the ideas at home and coming up with the creative, like how much are they doing at home artistically compared to when they're with you in their meetings?
Varies from artist to artist.
Right.
A lot of them will come in with a really solid idea, and sometimes like matrices already ready to go, and we're there almost exclusively as technicians, like just roll it up, print it, roll it up, print it. But some come in with a more exploratory thing. I have, you know, a notion of something that I want to follow and see where it takes me. All of these questions, it really depends on the artist. And y'all are obviously appreciators of art, so you know there's as many different types of artists as there are works on these walls. And it can vary wildly how much they come in with. As I work with an artist more and more, I think that we get to sort of a nice meeting point in the middle where I'm like, hey, when you come in, why don't we do this thing over here? And I think they're really fun. And they're like, yeah, that sounds great. But that's something that you build over time. It doesn't happen right off the bat. And that's kind of my favorite part, when I can put a little bit of Veronica spin on the stuff that they're already doing.
I have a question for Annalise about printmaking in Austin, because I live in Houston, but I've been coming to Austin for the past 30 years regularly, and always going to the galleries, and almost never that I see printmaking exhibition or half of the show printmaking. And I want to know from you, as somebody who lives here and in the business, what did you see different happening in Austria, let's say the past 5 years? I don't know. Do you see any difference? You see more prints, more...
Yes, there's a lot more printmaking. And I think that has to do with Print Houston being started. And then also, that's the reason why we started Print Austin. Because a lot of galleries weren't showing prints. And Flatbed, where I'm from, we have different galleries where we show prints. And, you know, in the past in Austin, I mean, you would have to go to a printing press to see print exhibitions. Slugfest or Flatbed, or, you know, the university, because there's a big print program there. And then now, since we've kind of expanded the dialogue, more galleries are getting involved in showing prints. So that is a very recent development.
But there's still a real schism in the art world overall. I saw the Christopher Wool show at the Guggenheim last year, and there were things that were on paper, and they were serigraphs, but they were calling them paintings. And they do that because there's still, you know, that attachment of superiority to a painting, even though it was so clearly a print. I just ranted about that forever. And you know, in a contemporary time that we're living in right now, where so many artists use so many different mediums simultaneously in their work, I don't understand why we still feel the need to do that taxonomy.
There's that hierarchy.
Yeah, really, it gets to me just. But it's still out there. We're still fighting the good fight.
Any more questions?
Pieces like you're standing in front.
Yes.
They're all different colors, but they're very similar in motif.
Exactly.
So can you talk how they all kind of come out of your studio? Like,
Yes.
the way you put the green down first, or you put the yellow down first, or the square matrix, or just the circles? What's the ordering?
You want to, okay. Well,
Is
first of
that
all,
too technical, like I should watch the video?
I'll mention that, but I actually never told you about the theme of the exhibition.
Oh, okay.
My theme is the tree trunk.
Okay.
And these works are from 2001 and 2 and 3 and 5. And everything else that you see in this exhibition is all surrounding the tree trunk. The images that you get when you cut the trunk horizontally, you get the rings, and if you cut the trunk vertically, you get linear pattern, right? So basically, in the past 17 years, I've been doing everything that's about this theme, but in an abstract way. So it started here, and then, you know, here, it becomes something more abstract. You only have the circle and maybe the texture of the trunk. And in the other work, in the other room, you see the circle, right? Like you cut the tree horizontally, you would expect to see the rings inside, but no, I put the lines vertically in there because I'm a theme variation artist, so I keep digging and exploring on the same theme again and again. I'm passionate about material, so I use, as you can see, boards, plexiglass, fabric, paper, everything that I see fit to work with. I'm also very experimental, which I never mentioned, and by that I mean that I do not follow the rules or what I learned in school, but I try to invent and experiment with different material, of course at the high cost, because maybe nobody has done it before, or maybe nobody wrote what it did, so I have to start from the beginning and experiment. So obviously I have a lot of pieces that do not work. I may break a lot of plexi before one plexi will come out printed well, or if you print and the pressure is too strong or too low, the image will not come correctly, then I have to erase and start all over again. So because it's experimental, I have a lot of overhead and many hours in the studio. But my desire to invent or innovate in the field are larger than the failures. So I keep going, and in the end, I see some results for this experiment. Any more questions?
No, I don't think
So
so.
I guess thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, that
and
was
hope you
wonderful.
learned something today. And you ladies, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you guys for coming. That was, I needed that.
Good.
There's a lot of good information there.
The test is available.